Welcome back to Obsolete Automotive. I'm Austin, and today's video is, will this 62 Dodge Custom 880 run? If you like this video and others, be sure to like and subscribe, and also check out the previous video on this car where I kind of do a quick overview on it and see what kind of treasures we could find in it. There's going to be a future video on this car that goes through the entire, facts and history and all that, and a thorough walkthrough, but I figured probably be best to see if it runs. So that's what we're going to do today. This car I got out of South Dakota, which is the land, or I don't know why I keep saying land of. Great faces, great places. Mount Rushmore is what it is. But anyways, this car probably hasn't driven since the late 60s or maybe early 70s from what I can tell when I did kind of the dig, the archaeological dig in the previous video. So from what I can tell, this thing's been dormant for decades. And I was told by the previous owner, the guy I got it from, that the block has a crack in it. But he didn't really know where or anything about it. I guess he had a mechanic kind of work on this car. I can tell that the heads have been off and the intake's been off, so I'm not sure what they did, but it's got new gaskets and the heads are stripped and clean. I did check the oil, and it is old and still black and a quart low, but there's no pancake batter on there, so there's no coolant getting into the crankcase, so I guess there's no crack in a coolant passage or anything like that I can tell going into the block. It does have coolant in the radiator, that's in there, which is like full of Dexcool or something like that, and it's still full, and there's no leaks. This car hasn't leaked any oil or any coolant onto the ground, which if you had a cracked block you would expect. But I mean, maybe it's cracked somewhere else and you can't see it visually on the outside. I haven't really noticed anything, but I guess we'll see if it runs, and that'll kind of tell us if it's going to be good or bad. I don't know, but it's the easiest thing to do, so that's what we'll do. If it does turn out that this block is indeed cracked or compromised in some form or fashion, I have several other big blocks laying around. This is a 361 cubic inch big block, so I have a couple of them kicking around that I can use if I need to, so it's not a really big deal if this block is, kaput. I got my battery in, I got some carburetor cleaner, it has oil in the crankcase, and I'm just going to see if it fires off, because that'll be the quick and easy way to tell if it might be good. Now, that would have been too easy, I guess. Oh, probably should get rid of the oily rag off the exhaust manifold so they don't catch on fire. I've never opened one of these up and smoke came out of it, or dust. Let's see if it has any spark. Yeah, it definitely has a little bit. Barely. not very strong. In fact, the points actually look a little bit like they're bent. Yeah, definitely bent. Okay. Guess I need to fix that first. Why would points be bent? Probably because somebody didn't know what they were doing, was messing with them, and I don't know, bent them somehow. Like, there's no real way they would get bent. Guess I can rob points off of another car. That's better. Just gonna see if it's making better contact for some spark. Not really. Barely making spark. Ew. That doesn't look that good either. So maybe I need to grab a new cap as well. Okay. Oh. We only have one wire connected to the coil. That ain't enough wires. Yeah. Okay, well, let me look into that too. That might be our reason why there's no spark. They only have a condenser, or yeah, hooked up here. Oh wow, now we got spark. You can hear it. Okay. Put the rotor button back in. Public service announcement, actually. People who claim to be mechanics sometimes aren't actually mechanics. Who hooks up their coil wrong? Like, how is that ever going to run? So keep that in mind when you're hiring somebody to work on your car. They may not actually know what they're doing. Got a new distributor cap. It's a really cheap, kind of not so great one. You can see how small those contacts are there. But this part is still in there. You look at that one. Looks like somebody chiseled it out. I don't know what the heck they were trying to do. Anyways, I'm gonna put this new cap on. Don't forget the rotor button. It can only go on one way. You can see the notch in the cap, and that corresponds to a little tab on the distributor. So it can only go on one way. Then the easy way to change all your plug wires over is to base it off that same tab. Of course, if you know the firing order, you can do it that way too. But if you don't want to play that game, just take them off, starting at the first one next to that notch. And these plug wires are ancient. Oh, you can see this the one with the red boot. From the factory, the cars would have one red one that would go on the #1 cylinder. And this one isn't going to the #1 cylinder. So jeez. And coil wire. Hopefully they kept it in the right firing order. I don't know. Guess I could check. All right, let's try it again. As you can see, some mechanic apparently worked on this car before and it would have never started. So just goes to show you not everyone really knows what they're doing when they're working on cars. So we had to fix the coil being wired up incorrectly. The cap was screwed up. The points were screwed up. But as soon as that was fixed, I literally turned the key and the car fired right up. And it's not running crazily bad or anything. I don't really see any problems, so it actually might be okay. I'm still kind of wondering what this crack was, but I almost kind of wonder if this mechanic that worked on this car, maybe he didn't want to work on it anymore and just told the guy that the block had a crack in it and it was no good. I don't know. Maybe I'll find a crack later on looking, but it actually seemed to run pretty good, even with one of the spark plug wires popping off there. I'm going to need to get new wires, that's for sure. There we go. And I have the fuel pump disconnected going to the tank, so I'm not going to draw any of that crappy gas in there. So I need to drain that gas, and then it can run off the tank. But I'm kind of curious if the transmission is any good. So what's left in the carburetor, I'm going to fire the car up and see if this thing will go forward. So there's a little bit of gas in the carburetor, so I'm going to crank it up, put this thing in drive, and see if it'll move. Ooh, that hasn't ran in a while. Let's go reverse. It drives. And we're out of gas. All the smoke is nothing to be concerned about. If this car has sat since the 60s, those rings and the pistons might need to seal back up, so it's probably going to burn a little oil. Plus, who knows what's in the cylinders or what was in the gas that was in the car. So the more you run it, the more likely that smoke's going to dissipate until it's running perfect. Otherwise, it's not making any noise, still not leaking anything. So is this block really cracked? I'm thinking maybe not. They just couldn't figure out how to get it to run. But that didn't take very long if you know what you're doing. All right, now that I got the gas tank disconnected, I kind of want to have a fuel source. So I got my auxiliary gas tank I'm going to hook up so I can move this car around and run the engine longer. I've also replaced the very leaky fuel filter. And you can see the one that was on there is absolutely full of trash. So this tank needs to be dropped out and probably cleaned. I also replaced the hoses because those were old as crap and not going to do me much favors. I've hooked up a line to the fuel pump because the fuel pump is new and works. And then I'll drop it into my auxiliary fuel tank, which I will strap into the car here. There we go. Move the cap, and I'll just drop the hose down in there and route this hose out of the way so it don't get on the exhaust manifold or anything. Let me get all this trash and stuff out of here so there's no risk of a fire. And crank it up and move it around. I'm going to give the carburetor a little prime since I used up the fuel. See that fuel pump's working. Well, that kind of concludes, will this car run? It does, and it drives. The transmission actually works pretty good. It's low on power steering fluid, but that's really the only issue that I see. I don't think that the block is cracked. The engine runs really good, and now at this point it doesn't even smoke anymore. Just from that little bit I drove it around and ran it. So, you know, it's going to need some work to be back on the road, since it's been off the road since probably the late 60s or 70s. It's going to need tires, it's going to need belts and hoses, probably rebuild the carburetor, stuff like that. The gas tank needs to be dropped because this obviously got rust in it, and cleaned out and sealed. Maybe, you know, I didn't check to see if the sending unit worked, but that probably needs worked on, and all the rubber hoses and things like that. So there'll be some future videos on that in terms of getting this car roadworthy. There'll also be a future video on the kind of the ins and outs of this particular car, the history of it, things like that. So stay tuned for that. If you like this video and any of the other ones, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to check out the Facebook group and Instagram and Patreon. All those links will be in the description as well, so you can check those out if you want. And catch you on the next one. I thought that this car would be easy to get running, since it, for the most part, had been dormant for a long time. But the only reason it was hard to get running was because someone at some point messed with it and didn't know what they were doing. So it was to be expected, I guess. Is it common that there's people that mess up things on old cars and I have to fix them? Yes, very common. In fact, pretty much all the old cars I buy have some issue that was caused by somebody trying to work on it that didn't know what they were doing, or that somebody hired to work on and they didn't know what they were doing. So it is very common to have issues like that. Usually simple things, like on this car, it was mismatched wires, a bad distributor cap, and some points that were bent. Boom, it fired up right after that and ran and drove.